So, we just have kind of an informal 1 hour meeting. I'm going to go pretty fast through some stuff, mostly to aim you guys at a couple of resources that are online and useful, like a packing list, like our itinerary list, and stuff like that. But if you have any questions, let's go ahead and tackle those sort of as they come up, so we don't have to like circle back on stuff awkwardly and so forth. I'm going to try to record this as well for anybody who isn't able to make any of these 5 versions of this meeting. So if you are aware of anybody among your classmates who's thinking about going on either rec or resource camp, but just isn't aware of the meetings or just has class during these times or whatever, aim them to me or to Ruffner or whomever, and we'll help everybody get sorted out. Sound good? Cool. So the basic biographical facts are it's going to be May 15 through June 9th. So that's the 4 weeks of intersession, starting the Monday right after exam week, the Monday right after graduation for folks doing that. And for resource camp, it's usually about 2.5 weeks, local, a lot of day trips, short range camping trips at Ozark Scenic Riverways, Land Between the Lakes National Recreation Area, and some spots around here. And then I think usually they head out east to Great Smoky Mountains National Park for something like a week or so to check out a bunch of kind of eastern hardwoods and hike up Chuck Stack or something like that to see how the forest is different at the bottom and the top and so forth. And then they come on back by June 9th, rolling in, pretty nasty by the end of that, all sweaty and gross, and that's fine. That's how we do. Rec camp is similar but slightly different. So we're going west this year. I've got a whole kind of 3D fly-through thing, wherever that is. Here we go. And we'll go through that here in a bit, but the timing is a little bit different as well. It's the same dates. We're going to come back a few days early, probably. I'm going to do my level best to get you back on June 7th, that Wednesday, since we're going long distance, and we'll be going hard through one or both of the weekends that are internal to that travel time. So, because we're going out west, we need a little bit more time to do that. Those states get pretty big out there, and that means we're going to have more like a week and a half locally, May 15 through the 21st, maybe as late as the 22nd or 23rd locally to do stuff that we'll see here. And then we'll pile into buses, and for 2.5 to 3 weeks will be long distance instead of about a week and a half for resource camp. So that is one difference. Both camps cover all the different forestry topics. We just do it in different proportions. We do a lot less industrial forestry operation stuff in rec camp because that's sort of the central wheelhouse of resource camp, and we don't want to duplicate all of our efforts. So we go to different places. We talk to a lot of the same kinds of people, but again in different proportion. So rec camp is really good if you want to go into conservation police work, law enforcement, be a game warden, that kind of thing. We deal a lot with those sorts of things. Obviously recreation. And for our urban forestry, our watershed, and our wildlife habitat conservation management folks, both camps go into those, but again we do a pretty different mix of the sites and so forth. So let's kind of run through our itinerary here. This is the superset list. This is all of or most of the spots that I would like to bring us to. We won't have time to get to all of them. So kind of depending on weather and injuries and health considerations of anybody taking camp, we'll kind of stick to this list, but add a couple targets of opportunity and remove a couple of things so that we have more time to have a higher quality encounter with some of these real showpiece places we're going to. And a lot of amazing folks, some of whom are SIU Forestry alums. There are thousands of us all over the place doing all kinds of stuff, all the way up to agency directorship, and everything in between. So I'm going to start off with Little Grassy Fish Hatchery. It's a state-run, basically aquaculture sort of facility, and they'll truck fish all over Illinois from here. It's a pretty cool operation, pretty close to home, and we'll also spend potentially up to a couple of days, weather and schedule permitting, over at Lusk Creek on the Shawnee. We have some really serious and interesting forest soils and wildlife considerations going on at Lusk Creek relative to horses. Horses, hooves, plus this fine powdery Peoria Loess and Alfred silt loam in this particular area of the world is a recipe for absolutely disaster. It's not good. But the Forest Service can't and doesn't want to back down from that. There's actually some world-class riding trails here, millions of dollars of really, really nice horse trail construction here in this particular space by a gal, Kelly Pearson, who just retired. She won the Forest Service Wide Trails Coordinator Award. So, like, she is one of the top trails people in the world, literally. And this was her duty area, and we all get to benefit from that. So we'll talk about what she did, what she does, and why it is that way in a forestry perspective kind of a way. From here, we're going to head to spots like Olmsted Lock and Dam for you watershed folks. This was a multi-billion-dollar, 30-year construction project. And as you can imagine, we can talk about some watershed stuff here. This is pretty cool. We're also going to talk about Army Corps of Engineers, plural, there's more than one of them, as a huge and really widespread employer. They are Department of Defense funded. They are a part of the $750 billion budget that DoD has. And they do a ton of land management. They do a ton of forestry. And they manage more miles of shoreline, like created shoreline and rivers and stuff, than there are natural miles of shoreline on the continental United States. Like, this is a pretty big operation. And they need a lot of highly skilled foresters like you. So they hire a lot of highly skilled foresters like you, even right out of graduation or beforehand. If anybody has worked at Rend Lake, for example, kind of know a little bit about what and how much more than just managing dams and created lakes or impoundments that Corps of Engineers does. It's kind of everything. So this can be a real thing for you. One of my grad students, a guy named Eli, worked for a couple years in Mississippi with Army Corps of Engineers at a couple of their lakes, and is now working at Yosemite National Park. So this is, whether you decide to stick with this or network over into other things, this can get you places. All right, from there, we're gonna head over to Land Between the Lakes National Recreation Area, which is kind of the test bed or experimental forestry site that the Forest Service really concentrates a ton of research and effort and trying things out east of the Mississippi. This is one of the big ones. And this place has hired so many of our students over the years, consistently for decades. They have an internship program where they want to hire you as a recent graduate. Like, the moment you graduate, they want you, specifically you guys in this room. And they're going to cross-train you on everything that the Forest Service does at Land Between the Lakes over the course of 1 or 2 years, and then you can go anywhere you want to in the federal system with that. So fire, wildlife habitat management, hunting management. There are hundreds of hunting compartments in this space. Watershed management, there's the sport fishery. So we'll talk about like recreation and visitor management over at the Golden Pond Visitor Center. We'll see what it means for Army Corps of Engineers to create these lakes, create this peninsula. It's not really an island at Land Between the Lakes, but it is about a 100-mile long peninsula. And for the Forest Service to just be like, okay, we'll just manage this for you then. After lots and lots of people, entire communities and towns were kicked out of this space so that these rivers could be made for commerce and war material production efforts in the interior of the United States. And these days, yeah, we can also do some pretty awesome sport fishing, stuff like that. So there's also an elk and bison prairie. It's awesome. We can't take any of the sheds that we find here but we sure will out west, where it is free and legal to do so. There's a ton of stuff going on here. They are breeding up bison populations for wild type reintroduction all across the eastern half of the United States, and just everything is happening here, including stuff like ORV management. There's a wildlife, like an injured wildlife rehabilitation place here where animals who are not capable to be returned to the wild or who are endangered and need to be bred back to more vigor. This place is a part of a bunch of national programs to do exactly that, including, I think, Mexican red wolves in the American Southwest. Pretty cool stuff. We'll talk about some burn compartment, some land use history, some impoundment management. There's a ton of stuff to see firsthand at Hematite Lake. It's very, very cool and right up in our faces. So that's a fun little walk and a good kind of a test hike. This will be one of our first hikes. It's about 2 miles, and a chance for people to kind of get their trail legs and get a sense for what kind of hiking trips or even backpacking trips do I want to engage in a little bit later on in summer camp when we're out west up on some big piles of rocks like the Rocky Mountains and so forth. And we'll talk about some of those options and what those are. From here, we want to there's also hundreds of miles of horseback riding trails, and there's a cowboy church here. I mean, this is legit. If you like horsies, or ponies, whatever, that's a thing. And you can do a tour duty there as an intern, working with Land Between the Lakes. And here at the ORV area, Turkey Bay, which is people from all over the eastern half of the United States will trailer their OHVs here, their dune rails, sand buggies, side-by-sides, UHVs, ATVs, OHVs of all stripes. And this is a spot where in the past, folks have done things like pull tires off of their OHVs, which have very, very high torque. The OHVs, not the tires. And they'll weld rebar spikes, 18-inch long iron or steel rods, radially out from the metal hubs of their wheels, so you can literally climb a vertical surface, spidering your way up. But as you can imagine, that pretty well chip shreds the surface that you are spidering up. So we'll talk about soil management and erosion and recreation and technology all interfacing together, and federal land management, so that this place can function as a containment area for a very, very potentially high impact kind of forest land use for non-timber forest products, recreation being one of those. So from Land Between the Lakes, we are going to head over westward. Land Between the Lakes will likely be our last local section of the class. So we'll have 2-3 days local day trips radiating out from the parking lot here. Then we'll have 2-3 days over at Land Between the Lakes, and from there we pack up, get all buttoned up, and head west. There's living history interpretation. There's literally everything going on here. We'll head west over towards Ozark Scenic Riverways. Time permitting, we'll get a nice chill flow trip in before we go out west and get all dried out and hot and sunny and sweaty and so forth. So that's on our list. This is one of the maybes, but it's a beautiful place and I love going there. So we can get a bunch of cool field skills lined up starting over there. From points westward like Missouri, we're going to drive for not quite 24 hours, drive overnight. We'll head over to Great Sand Dunes National Park and Preserve near Mosca, Colorado. And it is a beautiful and strange place. The tallest sand dunes, about 700 feet high, are here. Tallest sand dunes in North America. There's a bunch of stuff going on here hydrologically, so if you're a forest watersheds person, we'll talk about dune march, riffle formation, and some particular hydrologic characteristics of Medino Creek, which is this little body of here. This is a gaining and sinking creek. It actually flows through the sand in portions, so it's like water and it's really cold. And then you're walking on sand, and then it's water again. It doesn't know whether it's coming or going. The dunes inside the Riffle dunes inside of Medano Creek march upstream. This is one of very few places on the surface of the planet where this particular hydrologic phenomenon happens naturally. And the Park Service is very, very careful to protect that as one of the many outstanding and unique values of this place. So, we'll be hanging out at Pinion Flats Campground. This is what the view looks like from there. It's nice. It's also cold. We're going to be there in mid-May at over 5,000 feet elevation. I think this is closer to 7,000 feet. And it is not unusual for us to get snow here. So, one of the first questions we need to tackle with this trip is, what kind of gear do I need to bring? How intensive is my loadout? Our goal here, for conditions that we absolutely do encounter, this is not a maybe, 20 degrees Fahrenheit to 125 degrees Fahrenheit. We'll have a couple more meetings this semester if you're new to camping and stuff like that, and you're not real sure how to accomplish that without dying. We do this every year. This is our jam. This is a part of being able to function professionally in the field as a forester. And we'll treat stuff like your clothing as personal protective equipment. We'll talk about layering and selection of fabric type, like quick dry plastic fibers, polyester, stuff like that, capilene, or quick drying or warm, wild, wet natural fibers like wool with its natural lanolin, which is also highly flame retardant, pretty cool stuff, versus cotton. Cotton kills. So you're welcome to bring a cotton outfit on this if you have room in your backpack or your bag, but you are not welcome to wear that while we're doing any forestry stuff out there. So strong recommendation is to have 2 complete skin out, head to toe outfits, socks, underwear, shirt, long pants that can convert to shorts if you want, a button down shirt. Hopefully at least one of those layers is SPF 80. We are going to be highly exposed to sun and snow and rain and wind and so forth. This is essentially live fire exercises for forestry. So if you don't have a professional wardrobe yet as a student, maybe just coming in as a freshman or sophomore, this is a chance to start heading over to, believe it or not, of all places, Goodwill. You can get really, really cheap, perfectly fine stuff in your size, typically from Goodwill, or if you want to get brand name stuff from somewhere and pay literally 10 times as much for the same functionality, you can do that. I also have some professional clothing, like field gear, clothes, that I've assembled over the years from Lost and Found, from Goodwill, from extras that I buy when I find a really good deal. We found fleece quick dry plant, fleece lined quick dry pants at Walmart in Missouri for $4 one year. We cleaned them out, stuff like that. So I know Walmart is the great Satan, but they do have affordable quick dry clothing. You don't have to get brand names. It can be stuff like just the no-name house brands of Target or whatever. But you got to check the label and make sure there is 0% cotton. That is absolutely, absolutely required for this class. Okay, cool. So far, so good on not dying or not having any students die on this trip. I aim to keep that so far, so good. From Great Sand Dunes National Park and Preserve, we will strike out on some day trips and visit spots like Zapata Falls, which is a snowpack-fed ice column waterfall when we are there. So the water is cold, it's clear, it's a really fun, beautiful hike. We'll talk about things like soundscape. The sound, or the air density here is very different than what we're used to. The partial pressure of oxygen is very different than what we're used to. And so on this Zapata Falls hike, this is a good chance for you to take an inventory of how ready am I for some of these other optional, 100% optional, but valuable and fun hikes, like up to Mosca Pass. How am I set for that? Am I good to go? Up to, 10, 11,000 feet, and not barf my guts out from AMS, acute mountain sickness, elevation sickness? Or am I going to have some concerns? This is a relatively safe and easy place to do that, although calling the hike to Mosque Pass easy is a mockery of justice and truth. Moving on. Any questions so far? Straight. All right. From there, we'll head across the 100-mile wide San Luis Valley, one of the largest enclosed valleys on the surface of the planet, and also one of the deepest. This is several miles deep, but it's all filled in with sand and gravel that the wind picks up and deposits on that dune complex. We'll head to places like Dead Man's Cave Gulch. No, it's not a meme, that is a real place. And it's pretty cool. We'll start talking about stuff like, what does it mean to be a wildlife habitat manager as a part of being a forester in places where we have open range instead of a whole bunch of barbed wire fences everywhere and a bunch of closed-off paddocks. This is also our first introduction to Bureau of Land Management territory, where anything goes. If you want a akimbo wield a pair of AK-47s modified to shoot automatic or whatever, okay, shoot your shot, live your dream. BLM land is pretty much where that's going to happen in the United States. So it's a fun place to hang out for a while. We'll stop by here and check it out. From there, we'll continue across the San Luis Valley to lovely and scenic and very, very steep and somewhat difficult to drive heavy buses down Wolf Creek Pass. It looks like this. It's very pretty. It's awesome. And we'll stop along Treasure Falls on the way down. It's a beautiful, beautiful waterfall. This is our first taste of the kinds of hydrology that we just physically cannot have in Illinois because we don't have mountains like this. Treasure Falls is pretty big. Usually when we're there in mid or late May, the snow melt coming off of these, you can see a bunch of ski runs. These are snow-capped mountains most of the year and still will be when we're there in May. The waterfalls are usually running pretty good at that point in May, so it's a lot of fun. And it's a nice break on a relatively long drive. So we'll continue on towards spots like Cattle Mountain, and we'll have a chance to practice a bunch of forestry field skills like map and compass, orienteering, land navigation. It's a good excuse to go elk shed hunting right here on this side of Cattle Mountain. We found several elk skeletons last time we were out here, and it's just an absolute blast, no pun intended. This is also a way for you to start to understand spatial reasoning in terms of being out there when you're marking timber or being a backcountry ranger doing a search and rescue grid or whatever is bringing you out to the field. You get to make a lot of choices, and you need to make a lot of choices well spatially reasoned to do simple things like, how do I get to the top of Cattle Mountain? You can get there any way you want to, and you are free to get there any way you want to, but the choices you make on how you do that have direct impacts on your efficiency in the field as a professional and your personal comfort and so forth as a human being trying to move from one spot to another. So this is a tall peak, but it's not in any sense a dangerous peak. We cannot make any of these strictly safe, but this is a good kind of a proving ground for yourself to start acquiring some land nav skills and comfort if you haven't had a chance to develop those in the military or something like that previously. On our way from Cattle Mountain and Wolf Creek Pass across through the Durango area and a couple of national forests that we'll camp in right around there, we'll encounter spots like the Animas River, which is super pretty. It is down in this valley here, and this is a chance to go whitewater rafting. It's really pretty sick. So, highly recommend. Right about this time, we'll be about a week into our trip, maybe a little bit less, and Durango is a good spot to stop, lick any wounds that have opened up already, and tighten up our quartermaster list on who's got what gear. So spots like the Durango Outdoor Exchange, I generally try to carve out a couple hours to go to spots like this or an REI if you have more money than sense. Durango Outdoor Exchange has a bunch of used high-quality bomber-grade stuff, as well as new things if you want to plunk down for stuff for your personal inventory. For gear, anything other than a Walmart Ozark Trails tent will get you pretty well where you need to go. Eureka tents are fine. Mountain Safety Research, Mountain Hardware, Nemo tents are expensive but really, really nice. Hilleberg tents if you want to go 4-season in Antarctica, and anything in between. Just not, please don't get an Ozark Trails Walmart tent. They're about $20 and they'll last you about 20 minutes. Okay, you get what you pay for. So I do have one or a couple of tents that anybody's free to use or borrow, but that inventory, when it's used up, it's used up. I'm in talks with the backpacking club right now to borrow some of their gear for anybody who needs it, and we'll see how much additional that can get us. You can also rent full kit, cook kit, tent, sleeping bag, all that stuff from base camp on campus if you need to do that for 3 weeks or a month without having to shell out to buy all this stuff if you don't want to. You're also welcome to borrow from other students who have gone on summer camp in the past or from family. And if you don't want to go backpacking, if you don't want to schlep all this stuff around, you can take a base camping option. With every place that we go, all of the hikes, all of the backpacking trips are all optional. We're going to be in some world-class backpacking spots, but that's not a reality for everybody. It's not even a desire for everybody, according to your specialization or your health situation, whatever. That doesn't matter to me. Which trip you decide to pick, which backpacking trip, doesn't affect your grade one way or the other. It's just a different way to experience these spots since we go so far and we work so hard to get to them in the first place. All right, so once we conquer Durango and we have fish tacos and microbrews and update our gear if we need to do that, then we start pressing into, or we start moving out of the Rocky Mountains into the Intermountain West. We'll start seeing a little bit more brown and orange and red and a little bit less forest green. If we have time and inclination, if people are interested, if we have a bunch of archaeology and interpretation-oriented folks, we can stop at Mesa Verde National Park, which is a world-famous site of ancestral Puebloan culture and is home to that spot, yes, that one, Cliff Palace, and a whole bunch of other things. It's one big mesa, and there's a whole bunch of hiking trails and stuff like that. This is a pretty cool spot. We'll probably only spend a night or two here if folks want to. There's not much beyond this there, but it is a concentrated experience and a very cool one. On our way to the Grand Canyon from Mesa or Durango, we may, at our option, stop at the Four Corners Monument to pay $75 per vehicle to go look at a spot on the map that doesn't mean anything. It's just where 4 state lines cross. Anyway, moving on. We can get some fry bread there. That's nice. It's like funnel cake, but less sweet. And then from there, we continue a longest drive over to the south rim of the Grand Canyon, stopping at the Desert View Watchtower. This is a very famous spot, and we try to time this to hit this at sunset. As you can imagine, the sunset at Desert View is pretty okay. The south rim of the Grand Canyon, where we're going to be, is at about 7,500 feet elevation. It can be very cold there. We've got a foot of snow there late May into early June in 2019 when we went west here. So that 20-degree sleeping bag really is a real thing. If you don't have one, you need to get one. And understand whether the rating of 20 degrees on the sleeping bag that you bring is a comfort rating, where you're comfortable at 20 degrees, or a survival rating, meaning you're not comfortable at 20 degrees, but you're also probably not dead. Okay, so whichever direction you want to go with that, make sure the label says at least 20 or 15 or 10 or whatever. You can always kick it off if it's too hot, but if you need it, you really, really need it. All right, from Desert View, from the east or upstream end of the Grand Canyon, we'll head to Grand Canyon South Rim Village, home of the El Tovar Hotel, a world-famous old-growth, log structure, pretty cool spot. And from here, we'll be able to have ice cream and enjoy some cultural interchanges with Native American nations and so forth. And folks who want to can go backpacking down into the canyon. So this is one of the more famous and popular approaches. You pop off down the cliff at the bottom edge of the screen here, and you can see the trail down the Havasupai Garden drainage, down Garden Creek. This side trail is out to kind of an observation point, and then folks who want to get down to the Colorado and wet their feet there will take the Garden Creek waterfall descent down and most likely hike over to a place called Bright Angel. You've probably heard of Bright Angel before. This is it. The Bright Angel drainage goes all the way up to the north rim of the Grand Canyon. And so for anybody who wants to hike from the south rim down to the Colorado up to the north rim and get a bus pickup from the north end, that is one option for you. If you want to hike down to Bright Angel Creek and hike back out to the south rim the way you came, or another way out, there are several ways up and out on the north and south rims, you can do that instead. That is a much shorter hike. Neither of those hikes is easy. Would not recommend if you're unsure. Would absolutely recommend if you think it's a safe possibility for you. Absolutely, you will never forget these hikes. Okay. Let's see. There's a ton of stuff going on in this whole area. So, right south of the South Rim, we have the Kaibab National Forest. There's at-large camping here. There are elk wandering through campsites here. This is kind of like open ranges. It's kind of wildfire management stuff going on. As you can imagine here, this place is a tinderbox. And with climate change and bark beetles and stuff like that doing their thing, it's a lot, as the youth these days say. You might even say extra. So, this is quite a bit. So we'll spend some time on the Kaibab. The Coconino National Forest is the north rim counterpart to the Kaibab National Forest. The north rim of the Grand Canyon is at about 9,500 feet. So instead of that open pinyon juniper woodland that we were just looking at on the Kaibab Plateau, if anybody decides to hike out to the north rim side, we'll be in among free-range elk and bison populations jointly managed by the Park Service and the Forest Service in a ponderosa forest instead of pinyon juniper woodland. So really pretty different sense between the north and south rim. If we get snow on summer camp while we're at the Grand Canyon again, we're definitely not going to the north rim. They're going to get feet of snow while we get inches of snow at the south rim. So that gets cut off sometimes in May and June and July. That's a thing. From there, we're going to circle around the mouth, the upper end of the Grand Canyon at the Colorado, and we're going to stop by Horseshoe Bend, which is this beautiful multi-thousand-foot cliff face. 15 years ago, it got a couple thousand visitors a year. And then people started geotagging this spot on Instagram, and influencers blew this place up. Now it gets several million visitors a year. So in a 10-year period, there's a 1,000-fold increase in how many people are showing up, from thousands to millions, adding on 3 zeros on the total. And as you can see, there are no brakes on this hype train. There are no fences at this rim, and last time we were there, in mid-May, 4 people had already fallen off the cliff by taking selfies, and oh my god! And somebody's got to go down there and scrape them up, right? That is a Forester thing to do. The scraping up part, body recovery, not the falling part. We're very safe. We do the right thing the right way for the right reasons. We just get cell phone videos of people doing that. Okay, not us. We have a higher moral imperative. Okay, from Horseshoe Bend, we'll go through lovely and suburban Page, Arizona, in the middle of the desert. We'll spend an afternoon at Glen Canyon Dam. It's a beautiful spot. And from here, we'll just basically cross the Colorado over to the north side, head up towards Utah. The Utah-Arizona line is very, very close to here. And so your cell phone's going to go nuts. We're close enough that it's going to be talking to towers on both time zones and just completely lose its mind. It's going to screw up your instant messaging and all sorts of stuff. Your battery's going to drain real fast. It's a thing. But it's okay. I just got a $1,000 battery, lithium battery, replaced under warranty so that I can keep everybody's cell phones charged up. We have 2 100-watt solar panels we'll bring on the trip as well. And there's plenty of solar power here available. So from Lake Powell, which is all that blue stuff, artificial impoundment, and Glen Canyon Dam, we'll head over to, again, BLM land in this case, and spend some time at spots which in most cases don't even have names on the map. There's no reservations, there's no fees, there's no toilets, there's no water, there's no nothing. This is, if it were far north of here, this is what we'd call Badlands. But a huge chunk of the American Southwest is this. And there's a huge amount of forestry that happens in spots like this that don't necessarily have a lot of trees. So we'll talk about what Western water rights, what Western water management looks like. And we'll also get to do some fun stuff like, pretty close to here, there are some unnamed, unlabeled slot canyons. So we'll go on some canyoneering runs, and we'll see if we can bullseye womp rats at 15 meters in our T16 land speeders. All right. This is pretty cool, and it's very, very freeform. So this is a good spot for our search and rescue exercises. And extraction. Okay. Or exfiltration, as it's sometimes called. Okay. From the Glen Canyon Dam area, we'll head over to one of my favorite spots on the earth, the Holy Guacamole Trailhead, just outside of Zion National Park. Having spent close to a week at the rim or dipping down into the Grand Canyon, we're going to attack a canyon system and the forestry and land management involved from the canyon end instead of the rim end at Zion National Park. Here at Holy Guacamole, this little plateau right here is right in the middle of the so-called Chinle Formation, which is good for two things. Petrified forests. There are whole ass petrified trees right here that anybody is legally allowed to dig up and take 25 pounds plus one chunk per person per day. The Bureau of Land Management considers this a renewable resource because there are literally billions of these. Some of these trees started growing before detritivorous composting fungi and insects and so forth evolved to decay those trees. So there's a lot of them, and the Bureau of Land Management so far is not particularly worried about running out of these. Erosion is constantly adding more available petrified forest to folks. So this is right up against the border of the National Park Service land, also partially in the Chinle Formation, at Zion National Park. Inside the park, felony to collect and extract petrified wood. 300 yards on the other side of the fence line, totally fine. 25 pounds per person per day plus one piece. And if that one piece is this big, legit. Okay, so we're going to do a bunch of comparison contrasting. We've already seen a bunch of national forests, the Manti-La Sal National Forest, the Rio Grande, the we're gonna move through about a dozen different national forests, about a half dozen national parks, a bunch of state parks, a bunch of BLM land, which is not a park in any sense, and so forth. A bunch of water control features like Glen Canyon Dam, one of the largest in the world, and we're gonna see a bunch of contrasts. Like, what's it like to work 300 yards this side of the fence line versus that side of the fence line? The ranger in charge of this area, the patrol ranger in charge of this area for BLM has a 10,000 square mile, 100 mile by 100 mile square of land to manage. One person manages all of that. One. On the other side, there are hundreds of Park Service employees managing a much smaller than 10,000 square miles chunk of land we've labeled as Zion National Park. That means something. A lot of independence for that one patrol ranger, and a lot of teamwork. A high touch, a high contact with visitors versus a very low touch, low contact with visitors lifeway. Just kind of depends on what you like. And they're right next to each other. So we'll kind of peel back the curtain on this stuff and talk about what it means to be working for one agency or for another, even in the same place. So, moving on to Zion National Park. Again, we're going to be down in the canyon instead of looking down into the canyon, and one of our hikes will be to Angel's Landing. this is a possible maybe. I need to manage expectations on this one, the Park Service, because this is an extremely highly popular, world-famous hike out to this rock fin. We got an 800-foot, 1,000-foot, and 1,200-foot vertical drop, and the trail out to it is several feet wide in places. Like, this is a knife edge ridge hike, and it's perfectly fine, it's perfectly safe, as long as you don't have like explosive vertigo or something. Totally fine. Because millions of people a year want to do this, and all during the peak season, of which we will just be right outside of, they've instituted a permit system. And we may not get to do this. So we'll encounter what it means to have to throttle people's hopes and dreams and expectations when you've got a physical limitation on how many bodies you can pack on that knife edge ridge. Okay, moving on. This is also the home to the Narrows, which is the upper section of the Virgin River, which created Zion National Park, past Temple of Sinawava. Up here, the canyon is in places 30 to 40 feet wide, and the cliffs are 1,000 to 2,000 feet high. That's a very tall, skinny rectangle of open space that meanders and winds very rapidly. This is another world-famous hike that you can optionally attempt to go on. No promises. If this gets any rain anywhere upstream, the flash floods will shit you out as a corpse, and we might find a shoelace or something, okay? So the Park Service has zero sense of humor on people gate crashing that one. But on the upside, literally on the upside, outside of the canyon section of Zion National Park, there are lots and lots of acres of Zion High Country, all of it designated wilderness. If anybody decides to go hiking, camping, backpacking up there, we'll kind of split into smaller groups at Zion, among other places. The only people you are going to see are the other people in your group. Nobody goes up here because relatively few people know about it, and relatively few people have the sense that this is every bit as beautiful as down in the canyon, and you can have it all to yourself, but you got to do a little bit more work. There are shuttle buses running down in the bottom of the canyon, moving you from Lodge to Environmental History Museum to Temple of Sinawava and so forth. Up here, you know, it's all person power, and that's pretty cool. You get to self-determine a lot more up here, whereas the Park Service kind of has to be the heavier, the bad guy, down in the canyon because it's way more popular down there and crowded. So, we'll talk about managing the human species as another wildlife species with its own habitat needs, like breeding and mating, rearing, cover, food, rest, habitat, and so on and so forth, and use that suite of wildlife habitat management tools and see how that applies to human beings, and how some human management techniques have been applied or appropriated over to wildlife habitat management as well. Time permitting, and especially if weather is bad at Zion High Country, we'll head over to the fastest growing urban community in the United States, St. George, Utah, and go hang out with some desert tortoises. We'll go grab some bentonite clay with iron and sulfur and other kinds of impurities in it, and we'll make tie-dye dirt shirts out of clay dye, and so forth. So we have some options and so forth. I will ask everybody to be at least a little bit flexible and open-minded with, like, if we're getting snowed out and it's, you know, lethally dangerous in any of these places, I need to pack up and move us to another spot, but there are lots of other spots here, and they're all good. Like desert tortoises, that's all right, man. So there's a really cool tension between urban development and sprawl in a dry but rapidly expanding place. I don't know if you guys have seen in the news how some communities outside of Scottsdale, Arizona are literally out of water, period, and they're having to pay exorbitant amounts to have water trucks driving in to supply individual houses with water on a day-by-day basis. Like, this is the context in which St. George is the fastest growing desert and fastest growing, period, community in the United States right now. It's nuts. Those goofy Mormons. Every time. All right. If you're a Mormon, I apologize. Mormons are fine too. You're totally welcome on this trip. It's cool. I'm mostly focusing on the Mormon fundamentalist separatists that engage in polygamy and very harmful things like that with their youth in their community. The Dixie National Forest is right around here, and all of the wildland fire management, all of the wildlife habitat management stuff is in very sharp focus here. There are several huge Native American nations and reservations which are sovereign countries inside the United States. Real close to the Dixie and out at the Grand Canyon. And some of them prefer to live what they believe and understand to be a more traditional or native way of life, living on elk and muley, deer and reindeer, Dall sheep, stuff like that. And so the Forest Service, the Park Service, everybody is trying to figure out how, in the face of climate change and climate destabilization, how do we protect and preserve and respect and honor traditional ways of life, other ways of knowing versus Starbucks Frappuccinos. Okay, so Dixie is one place where we can really come to grips with that a little bit, as well as at the Grand Canyon. Time permitting, we'll go get lost in Cottonwood Point Wilderness. Now that I've jinxed it, we can't do that. Somebody's going to get lost. All right, anyway. From Zion National Park, the next most common stop along the so-called Grand Cirque, or Big Loop of national parks, is Bryce Canyon National Park. It is a gorgeous spot. This is one of the crown jewels of the United States National Park System. It's also tiny, so we're not going to spend a ton of time here. But the Slot Canyon backpacking here is really pretty good. So if we have a bunch of students who want to get out there and check it out, this is one spot to do it. This whole area is maybe not quite the size of the SIU campus. It's really not very big, but it is intensively used. So we'll wrestle with some stuff like, you know how the Forest Service has that multiple use mandate? Well, the Park Service doesn't have to worry about that. It is recreation and resource preservation, period. But within the recreation side of it, multiple use is absolutely a very serious thing. And the trails and the trail construction and the people management inside of this, you can go walking around in this area. It's really super cool. Those are called rock chimneys or hoodoos. And sunset and sunrise here is absolutely phenomenal. So we'll get up super early and do some of that. But we'll see what it's like to run a trail system here and be that guy or that gal. Pretty cool stuff. From Bryce Canyon, we start looping north and back kind of eastward through Capitol Reef National Park. This is a place where this is very much every bit as beautiful as the Grand Canyon, Zion, and so forth. And like nobody goes here, nobody spends any time here. So we kind of have Capitol Reef all to ourselves. So as we start getting together our thoughts on who's coming, what kinds of trips, spots you guys are most interested in, this is kind of my ace in the hole for if we have a bunch of students who are absolutely tired of and done with really busy, popular places like the Grand Canyon, as beautiful as it is, we can go get lost here and just kind of have the whole place to ourselves. The night hiking at Capitol Reef is the darkest and starriest anywhere in the continental United States, bar none. So if you've never seen the colors of the Milky Way before, because you grew up in Chicagoland or something like that, I grew up outside of Cincinnati, I didn't even know the Milky Way was much of a thing until I was older. You'll be able to see that here. You'll see more satellites and shooting stars here than you have ever seen in your life. Now that I've said that, it's going to be cloudy the whole time. No big deal. All right. So Capitol Reef is pretty awesome, and it's all ours if we want to take it. And it's a really pretty drive, too. At Goblin Valley State Park, we'll get kind of a contrast of state and federal land management. This is a place that visitors have beaten absolutely to death, and they have tried to beat each other to death with. It is unfortunate, but people have been pushing over. You know those rock chimneys at Bryce? People pushed them over here onto the trail and roll boulders down at each other. So we'll kind of wrestle with that just a little bit. And also, if we get to camp in Goblin Valley State Park, the wind running through those hoodoos in Goblin Valley has kind of a moaning, whistling, screaming sound to it. It's pretty cool. So we'll try that out and see if that piques anybody's interest. Next up is Arches National Park. We all know about Arches. Delicate Arch is the one that shows up on all the postcards. We can do that hike. It is hot and sunny. It's not very long, but it is kind of steep. So the night hiking here at Arches is also awesome. Arches is a very, very busy place. We'll be there around Memorial Day, which is one of the busiest days, the busiest weeks of the busiest national parks in the world. And we'll get up at 3 or 4 in the morning on Memorial Day to get in line to get in, and they're going to close the front gate by 7 a.m. because the park is literally full. So there's real consequence to the management decisions that you make as a forester or a park ranger, and it affects a lot of people's lives when you're working at a place like Arches. We'll talk about some research projects that I helped work on at Arches National Park to figure out, do we need to close that gate? When do we close that gate? How do we explain that to people? This is an active area of research all across the park system, and one that's been very satisfying and difficult to work with. We'll get out on some of these rock fins, as they're called, and hike along them. It's like surfing on stone, sort of, just without any water at all. And we'll head out to a spot called Dark Angel and Double O Arch and kick around and see some things. But by the time we get to Arches and Moab nearby, this is one of the towns where we'll resupply for groceries, get showers, stuff like that. If you want to rent a Humvee and a machine gun, this is your chance. Work at whitewater rafting here, or whatever. All of the things are in Moab. It's the theater of all possibility. Once we are here, though, we're starting to sort of loop back. So Moab, Arches, and then Canyonlands is kind of next. Canyonlands is another good spot to go camping and hiking and wrestle with wildlife. Bears have started to incur here, and that really affects hiking in these slot canyons. These walls are only several hundred feet high, but like we'll go up a drainage and then go up out the head of that canyon, up over a wall, or through a cave, down into the next drainage over, and up onto a shoulder terrace, and then up into a third, and then down and out a wash. This is hiking in 3 dimensions, truly. It is a blast. And everything is sandstone. It's all super grippy, not dangerous or scary at all. It's just a ton of fun. So we'll practice stuff like night hiking, and we'll talk about what it's like to be a backcountry ranger here. Some of the toughest people I have ever met are here. They're like physically tough, like their skin is like football leather consistency. Anyway, yeah, this is a pretty cool place to work. And some of our alums have worked here recently. We'll also stop by. There's literally thousands of petroglyphs, even just on the one drive into Canyonlands National Park. Newspaper Rock is one of the publicly available ones. If you guys would like to, we can pull off on the side of the road where there's some others. Yeah, come on in. And check out some other petroglyphs that the Park Service is very keen to not talk about and just hide in plain sight. Okay? So that's a thing. We're just getting finished up with the meeting, so you can get set up if you need to. Yep. And last off, we'll cool back off. We'll rehydrate. We'll get cold again. If you want to hike up Longs Peak at Rocky Mountain National Park, this is our last big hurrah, and then we'll drive another 24 hours, finish up at home around June 7th on a Wednesday. And everybody take about 4 showers in a row and then sleep for a week. Or get off to work or whatever you need to do. Okay? So, that's the plan. Last thing, I want you to go to logan-park.org and then find the teaching category, and then under that, Forest Rec Summer Camp. And that brings you this. That's got a whole list of everywhere we're going. We're not going east this year. So skip by that section. But it's got a whole bunch of these spots and some videos of things so you can start to learn what to expect. And then in addition to that, I've got the gear list, I got frequently asked questions, I got a skills list with like ropes and knots and stuff like that. And then like this recording that I'm capturing right now, we'll post that online and everybody will be good to go. Okay? Cool. That's it for the moment. As we're packing up here, I'm around for questions. Otherwise, I will see you next time. Let your buddies know that we're having these meetings in case they're not aware. Thanks very much. We'll see you next time in a couple of weeks or whatever.